Click, 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 click. Hello, everyone, and welcome to BHT Studios live special edition Summit 2021. Just want to make sure everything sounds good. Is audio good, guys? Is video good? Let me know. Oh, I should even change the scene here. Thanks for doing this. What a treat. Yeah, thanks so much for joining. Did you guys, I got to change the color to, there we go. Now we're on the theme. And I should have worn my Fujifilm t-shirt as well. Thanks. Sound and look wonderful. Awesome. Thank you so much. I was like, hey, Mitch, Boris, David, Cafe YVR. Hey, Cafe YVR, you're going to be my moderator. Last time, thank you. You saved me. Let me see here. And actually, I think you automatically already are moderator, Cafe YVR. I think I picked you once, and then now you're just automatically a moderator. I was working on OBS all morning to try to make it work, and didn't work. So I can't embed the photos that I took. But how many did you guys watch the X Summit, or you're watching this as a summary of the X Summit? Because if that's what you're doing, I apologize. I couldn't get OBS working. I took screenshots throughout, but I wasn't able to. I can't share the screenshots with you, so I apologize. But I had a good time watching. And here Max talk about the XE4 is cheap and superb, 27. Yeah, they have it with the kit, the 27, which is nice. Fujifilm changed the price on us, so they told us it was $799 US. But it showed at $849, and then the kit was supposed to be $999 US with the 27. But then they changed it to $1050 US. And so I think a lot of us are kind of scrambling to change our videos. I do have a video that I'm going to post right after this on the XE4, but I don't have a copy. That was kind of the running joke. There was only so many copies in Canada, and Lee got a copy, DP Review, and the Camera Store, but bigheadtaco did not get a copy. But mine should be coming either this week or early next week, depending on how quickly. Maybe the Camera Store, they'll send it directly from Calgary to me. So we'll see what happens. I watched it. It was pretty interesting. Yeah, I think the big news, I'm going to go through my slide presentation anyways, even though you guys can't see it. So again, I apologize, but I'm going to bring it up here so I can kind of go through it myself so that we have something to discuss. So let me just select all. Command A, is that it? How do you do select all? And let me see here. Pardon my. She want to open all 66 items. Yes, I do. Okay, I'm getting ready here. Lots of comments flying in. Thank you so much. Trusting that you give the highlights. Okay, well, I appreciate that. Like I said, so is the best 70 to 300 or the 50 to 140? Yeah, those are two different lenses. The 50 to 140 is a pro red label lens. It's f2.8 throughout. It's probably twice the weight. So I do have, if those of you guys have been watching YouTube, I do have the 70 to 300. This is a lightweight alternative to the 100 to 400 red label lens or the 50 to 140 red label lens. But the 50 to 140 is very specific. It's a high-speed f2.8, really meant for sports as well as like wedding event, for the fastest shutter speed that you can get, where something like this is more like nature, wildlife. You can do some type of sports action. In my video, I showed me doing video and photos of boats and birds and stuff like that, but it's very fast moving. I would say get the 200 f2 and the teleconverter, and the 140, the 50 to 140 f2.8 and get the teleconverters if you need that kind of pro optic, pro speed, but pro weight, pro size, right? So I think this is a good upgrade for anyone that has the XF 55 to 200. This is a good upgrade. It's the same weight as the 55 to 200, but you have the extra pull of going to 300, and it works with the teleconverters, the 1.4 and the 2 times. So it's a good deal for what you're paying. Let me see here. Donald, I may be switching from Sony to Fujifilm. And Donald, are you specifically talking about the GFX 100S? Which I don't know when I'll get that. Hopefully I'll get that at least in a month, but you know, everyone's gonna want it, and it's gonna become political, right? Because you know, medium format magazine is gonna want it, and everyone's gonna want it, including people that are actually gonna buy it. All the camera stores in town are gonna want it, and right across Canada, like Henry's will want to do a thing with it. And so I think we're all gonna be fighting for the GFX 100S. Boris, boycott Fuji until Taka gets the respect he deserves. Yeah, you know, like I think you have to remember that when I first started doing blogging and YouTube, there wasn't anybody else in Canada other than me and the camera store. And now a whole bunch of other guys have joined. And of course, I want priority over everybody else, but it also gets political, right? They look at how many followers you have on YouTube, how many followers you have on Instagram. I always tell Fujifilm, look, I also write for magazines. I write for Fuji Love magazine. And so I hope that that would bump me up to the top of the list, but it doesn't, unfortunately. But I will be patient, and I will be grateful for what Fujifilm sends me. And hopefully I'll get the XE4, the 27 pancake, and the GFX 100S. And like I said, there was a lottery in my video. I've talked about it. There was only a few copies of this, so I don't think a lot of the other guys got the 70 to 300. I'm sure DP Review got everything, but there's only so much of this copy, so they're probably going to ask this back this week. And then whoever has the XE4, Lee's got the XE4 and the 27 pancake. He'll probably ship that back, and then I'll get that very soon. And there is a new film simulation. Yeah, what was it called? I'm excited. In the Q&A section, they did mention that new film simulation is going to what do they call it, guys? I forgot the name. It's in the slide presentation. It's currently only going to be available on the GFX. Fujifilm says they designed it specifically for the medium format camera, but we know whatever is on the GFX system, film simulations eventually make its way into the X series, but they just have to reformulate it. But just at this point, they're not interested in reformulating it. So you can see a lot of Jonas's picture on his Instagram feed that he's been using the new film simulation. It looks beautiful. And I am interested in seeing that in comparison to Classic Chrome and Classic Neg. Classic Neg is still very true to my heart based on the older Superior 200. So let's just see what this new film simulation looks like. Let me see here. Great review videos you have made. Thank you, Jay. I appreciate that. Can you show the lock button and how it works? Thanks for the yeah. So there is this new lock feature, which is very common on these kind of telephoto lenses. What it's called lens creep, right? So if you have this on a body and around your neck and you're walking or hiking, this tends to kind of slowly start to creep down on its own. So what you can do is just lock it right there. Now it's locked. Now there is no lens creep. The lens will stay put. Actually, you just saw that it shifted. That's only because the way to get out of this lock mode is if you just turn it. Hear that click? Do it again. See that? So you don't have to remember to unlock it. So you have it locked. It's not going to shift. And then when you're ready to shoot, you aim it at your subject and you just turn it and it unlocks automatically. And that's a nice feature because lens creep is irritating. I remember having like some 24 to 105s and stuff like that. And you're walking, you look down, and then the lens is sticking out, right? So having that lock mechanism is great. Thank you for asking about that. Which to pick, XE4 or XS10? Good question. And I actually have a video that I've been working on since 6 a.m. because Fujifilm wouldn't release the official product pictures until 6 a.m. this morning, like my time, so 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so since 6 a.m., I got up at 5, watched the X Summit, and then since 6, I've been working on my video that I shot a couple of days ago. So just wait till after this live show, and then maybe around noon, I'm gonna like render the video file, upload to YouTube, and you could watch all 20 glorious minutes of me talking about a camera that I don't actually have in my hand. And Thomas, thanks for joining me from Germany. We got a lot of German followers. I guess this is a good time for Germany. Donald saying more like X-T4. I was more impressed with the people of Fujifilm and how passionate they seem to be for the products. Yeah, Donald, I totally get it. Like I always like to say the Fujifilm engineers, the designers, the software engineers, the top guys, they're all camera nerds, right? They're in it for the love of photography. Fujifilm makes more money on the chemical division and medical division than they do from the digital imaging products. They make a lot of money on Instax. But those that are in the digital imaging, they're passionate, and there's definitely a passion for photography in the Fujifilm ecosystem. As you saw, the top executives just love cameras, and they're very particular about how they make their products. And so even their lens design, Jonas in the presentation had said something really cool, talking about their lenses. Jonas said that that Fujifilm leaves even the little flaws, which creates characteristics in each lens that sets Fujifilm lenses apart from the competition. And that's true. They can technically make every lens perfect, but they don't. And I don't know if it's like on purpose in terms of like they can correct for it, but how does that affect the characteristic and the look of the lens? And so I feel that Fujifilm definitely does that. With the Fujicron, the 23f2 that I'm using right now to film this video, I love it way more than the 23-1.4, although technically that lens is super sharp. And I even tested the 23-1.4 against the Leica 35 Summilux. And in terms of sharpness for the area that you're looking at, which is kind of because it's a crop lens, crop sensor, when you put the 35 Lux on the Fujifilm, you're getting the center portion. I preferred, in terms of like technical sharpness, the 23f1.4 is as sharp, and I felt sharper wide open than the Leica 35 Summilux, which is like a $4,000 or $5,000 lens. But I still prefer the 23f2 that I'm shooting this video on because of the way it renders the shadows. It just has a certain look that I like better than the 23-1.4. And so even the characteristics of the lenses, I think Fujifilm really understands creating character, not just sharpness. X Pro 3 getting cheaper now. Is that true, Mac? That would be great if they drop the price. They rarely drop the price of the X Pro series until it's replaced. But I know Fujifilm has been struggling a little bit in selling it because of that weird, I have one here, the articulating screen, which, you know, I mean, if you trust photographers like myself and Jonas Grask, if you guys know who Jonas is, you should be following him on Instagram. Jonas with a J. He actually is a medical doctor, but he does all the official pictures for Fujifilm. And he's a very talented photographer as well as a film photographer. And the funny thing is, both him and I shoot with an X Pro 3 and a Leica M7. We both love going back and forth between the two. And Jonas loves his X Pro 3, and I love my X Pro 3. And so if you're like a technophile videographer guy, or just you go with the mainstream, you probably you won't like this on paper. But everyone that I've shown this camera to in person, they all liked it. Even the haters who said, I hate the design, I can imagine how this will work, I don't think I'll like it. And as soon as I showed it to them, like, oh, that's pretty cool. And that's the thing about design and ergonomics. You can't just imagine design and ergonomics by looking at it on pictures, in video, and think that somehow you're so intellectual that you can project your feelings towards something even before you get it in hand. I think it's very arrogant for people to think that. So even on my XE4 review, I'm gonna save my judgment until I actually have the XE4 in my hand. But you know, I did talk about like, this is what I think, this is how I feel, but I gotta wait for it to have it in hand. And I'm telling you, this articulating screen, for those that don't shoot video, this is a great screen, because it not only does it not allow you to chimp, it just changes the way that you shoot. So anyways, long talk about the X Pro 3, which I love. And if they're dropping the price, that's great. Hopefully that'll put it into the hands of more people. Dark digital room. Is the AF quiet and fast on the 2728 now? That I don't know. That Fujifilm didn't mention if there was a upgrade in the focus motor. All they said was RWR. I do have the presentation here. If we just give me a second here, let me bring up the presentation under Fujifilm. And again, sorry guys for not being able to get the OBS working. I will give myself more than 15 minutes to figure out how it works. And so let me just bring up that lens in the official presentation, which Fujifilm told me I am not allowed to share, because this was made specifically for Fujifilm Canada. And so here we go. So I have the thing here. I have the, you know, here's the presentation. So technically I'm not sharing it, right? So I don't see it mentioning anything about the autofocus. It just says fast autofocus and weather resistant minimum. Yeah, they don't mention it. You're gonna have to check out Lee's video on YouTube and see his review, because he has both the XE4 and the 27. See what he says, but I won't know until I get my copy. What about its magnification ratio? If you're talking about the 70 to 300, it'll be 83 centimeters close focusing at 0.33 magnification. I do wish it went to 0.25, but it doesn't. It's 0.33. And when you put the teleconverters on there, you should be getting closer to 0.25 or even more. Let me see here. Yes, dinner time and beers. Also, it's dinner time in Germany. And Don, hello from Montreal. Will XS10 still be the best vlogging camera among Fujifilm cameras? I think so. Because if you want to be like a pro vlogger, you should be putting on a shotgun microphone for better audio. And with the flip up screen on the XE4, it gets in the way unless you get a cage with a cold shoe mount that puts the microphone sort of in a different position. And also because of the ibis, the built-in image stabilization on the XS10, I say that for Fujifilm, the XS10 probably is the best camera for vlogging, even though it's a little bit heavier than the XE4. And Thomas, you're going to keep your XT1 and your 3514. Hey, the 3514 is an amazing lens. And if you're happy with the XT1, you don't have access to the newer film simulations. But hey, if you're happy, then you are happy. On eBay, it's very much cheaper. Talk about the X Pro 3s. Oh, I see. Some of the used X Pro 3s. How's the performance of the 3514 on the XT1? I know in the XT1 it was okay. It has mostly to do with the motor. On the newer XT4s and the X Pro 3s, the older Gen 1 autofocus 3514 is better, but it's still not great. It's nothing like the Fujichroms. The Fujichroms use a nice stepping motor. It's very quiet, very fast, and very accurate. 3514, it's faster and a little bit more accurate, but definitely not quiet. GFX 50R or the GFX 100S. I personally say the 100S. I was never a fan of the 50R. I know a lot of people like it. I know Ken Wheeler likes it. I found it off balance. Like it was very left body heavy. And when you walked around with it all day, which, you know, the 50R, people think of it as like a walk around medium format. I actually found the 50S, although heavier, better balance. It was narrower and it had a nice grip. And walking, and the same reason why I like the XS10 as a walk around lens. And I had this with the 70 to 300 with no strap, and it was very comfortable because of the grip. And so I say 100S because of the battery, the new battery that they're using that's in the XT4, because of the ibis, because of twice the well, mind you, twice the megapixel itself doesn't make it a better camera, but you know, you are kind of future proofing yourself because more and more 35 mil or full frame cameras are going to 50 megapixels. Although on the medium format, you're getting lower pixel density, which gives you better and which gives you bigger pixels, which gives you better dynamic range and lower noise at higher ISO. But I would pick the 100S over the 50R. But I mean, the 50R now, they'll probably drop the price again, and the 50S as well. And now it's going to be like half the price or whatever, right? So if you're budget minded, get the 50R or the 50S. But if you want the latest and greatest, you're going to get the 100S, right? Let me just see here. Hey, Paul Yan, how's it going, buddy? Go follow Paul Yan on Instagram. He's an amazing rock star, rock producer, and as well as an awesome photographer. And I have a cool interview with Paul Yan in my YouTube video. He's an awesome guy. I can't wait to hang out with you again, Paul. Paul, you're interested in the XE3 or the XE4? We'll talk. I have my video that I shot, and I personally think, Paul, you will like the XE4 because you're not a techno nerd. If you're a techno nerd, the XE3 has way better control features, way more buttons. It's more ergonomic, and price-wise, it's going to be better. It doesn't have an articulating screen. I think that's going to be the killer feature of the XE4, and which is kind of like, I'll be back. Which is kind of why I think I have a feeling that the X70 is dead. I don't want it to be dead, but I think it's going to be dead because, you know, the XE4 is going to have a similar, not the same, but a similar articulating screen to the X70. And I think, Paul, you'll love this. You'll love the low angle stuff. You'll love having the screen up like this and all the new film simulations and stuff like that. So anyways, Paul Yan, thanks for joining, Paul. And Paul, it's got to be late where you're at. And again, everything just kind of jumped. Sorry, guys. The Remy, good question. 7300, does it have an OIS switch? And all the new lenses now, they do not have an OIS switch. They do not. They allow the camera itself to know when you need it. And I actually kind of like it. The 10 to 24 has it, and I've often switched it off by accident as you taking the lens on and off. I do, you know, like there's some things that we want control over and some things maybe we shouldn't have control over. And for someone like me, maybe you're different. I prefer to not have an OIS switch. I prefer that to allow, especially because now you know, like the XT4 has IBIS as well. Let the computer decide. With the 5-axis, I think Billy had said, if you have IBIS and OIS, two of the axes, I think distance and yaw or something is the lens, the OIS, and then all the other 3 axes are actually done by the sensor. And so the computer decides, all right, what lens is on here? What's the best combination? And then when you're fiddling with OIS on and off, like with your switch, you're not letting the computer do its job, right? So anyways, that's my thoughts about the switch on the OIS switch on the lenses, that it's if it's gone or not. Let me see here. Looking forward to that XE4. Yeah, I'm looking forward to reviewing it as well. I love the XE3. There's a lot of things stripped out of the XE4. They've kind of gone minimalist with the X Pro 3 by removing tons of buttons and removing a lot of features like the HDMI out, removing the front dial push-in button, and then the X100V, they removed the D-pad, they removed buttons, they, you know, like they're removing stuff, right? And now with the X, one of the complaints I had was they removed the autofocus the focus dial that you get to pick. You get to pick, like a single, continuous, and manual. Well, the XE4 has that removed. The XS10 has it removed. Now you have to dig into the menus to access it, which to me doesn't make sense. That's where I think the control is a good thing. Did you catch the price of just the 27? Yeah, it's $399 US. And when you group it in with the kit with the XE4, you're basically paying $199. You're paying $200 for that lens if you buy it with the XE4. So that's a smoking. I mean, I think even if you don't want the lens, just get it and then sell the lens to a buddy for, if you're being generous, $200, what you paid, or sell it on Craigslist for, another $100 above that, and you save somebody $100 as long as they'll know because there's no box, but because when it comes in a kit, it doesn't come in a separate box. They save $100, but they still get a brand new lens, right? XE4 or X Pro 3, for me personally, very different cameras. I go with the X Pro 3 because I want the pro features. I like the premium build, made in Japan, titanium top and bottom. I love the hidden articulating screen on the X Pro 3. X Pro 3 is double the price of the XE4. This has a decent grip, and front grip and rear thumb kind of a grip area. It has a dedicated ISO control here. Everything about the X Pro 3 to me is better than the XE4, other than if you want a front articulating screen. And EVF is better. The hybrid EVF OVF on the X Pro 3 is better. But, it's twice the price, right? Fuji Rumors, how's it going, Fuji Rumors? Long time no talk. Grazy, how's it going? Kusanagi Kyo, did you guys watch the Fuji US new leak video? No, I didn't see that. Maybe I'll check it out. Thank you for mentioning that. Fuji Rumors, also congrats on the XF80. The XF80 is great. 80 f1.4. I'm excited about that. My favorite GFX lens has been the 63. That was my first favorite. And then the 120 f4, which everyone liked the 110 f2. I couldn't focus that darn thing. It was too hard. It was too, and f4 was still like shallow depth of field enough with that kind of compression. And it was OIS. But I think my next favorite, and then the 23. I love the 23 f4 ultra wide. And I think maybe this 80 1.7 will be my next favorite lens. It looks pretty cool. A lot of people are asking questions of Fuji Rumors, which is fantastic. What do you think about no WR or IBIS on the XE4? They can't fit the IBIS mech in the XE4. If you notice on the XS10, the reason why the battery goes this way is to make room for the IBIS mech. Now, in a few years, Fujifilm may be able to shrink it to the point where they don't need to do this little sideways things with the battery. But for now, the XE4 batteries like this, the IBIS mech won't fit. So they would have to change the position of the grip to make IBIS work in the XE4. So for now, it's just not going to work. And none of the prosumer line camera body, so the XE series, the new XS10, and the XT double digits, so the XT10, XT20, XT30, they've never had weather sealing because Fujifilm is giving you the same sensor and the processor as the pro level. There needs to be a distinguishing, there needs to be a difference between the pro and the prosumer. And of course, everyone wants every feature in the pro in the small body at half the price. Well, that makes no business sense. Then why would anyone buy an XT4 if they gave the XS10 all the features of the XT4, but just smaller? Because then if they did that, they would have to sell it for the same price. And then everyone will complain saying, well, the XS10 is the same price as the XT4. Why? It's smaller. There's less metal. It's like, well, you can't win, right? I think Fujifilm made the right decision of, look, if you want a prosumer body, we're going to prioritize size and weight. And with that, there's going to be some compromises. One of them is weather sealing. Another one is, well, they put IBIS in this, which was kind of a bit of a surprise. But with the XE4, to keep the priority for the XE4 clearly was to make it minimalist and to make it as compact as possible. And to do that, they had to take some features away, but for sure they won't add WR unless what Fujifilm does in the future, which I don't see them doing, is giving a separate sensor and a separate processor to the prosumer line. So let's just say, for instance, the Pro stuff will have a 36 megapixel or 40 megapixel sensor, and the prosumer stuff will have a 24 megapixel sensor, and then they'll throw in weather sealing and other pro-like features, but the distinguishing mark will now be the sensor is different and the processor is different. But since they're giving you the same sensor and the same processor in the Pro and the prosumer stuff, they have to add extra stuff. You know, don't see it as they're removing stuff, but they're adding extra stuff to the Pro. And I think the XE4 without weather sealing makes sense to me. I wish they kept the D-pad. Yeah, I mean, the XE3 was the first Fujifilm camera to give you the touch screen, joystick, but no D-pad, where the XT20 had touch screen, D-pad, but no joystick. And so even the XE3 didn't have a D-pad. They removed it already, which I actually liked because of its compact size. There was very little thumb real estate, and to remove the D-pad to me made sense for a prosumer camera. But when it comes to be a pro camera, and that's where the X100V is a bit of an anomaly. They could have fit a D-pad. It would have to been a smaller one. There's a little bit of a little ridge, like a little lip here. I understand why they did it, but I do wish that the X100V had a D-pad. That would have made it perfect. I mean, the X Pro 3, same thing. They removed the D-pad out of the X Pro 3, and I miss it. And even without it, I wish at least they made the front button here a push-in feature, but they didn't. It's just the back. The back has a push-in, but the front does not. So they took more, and of course, as I always keep on complaining, there is no HDMI out on the X Pro 3. All the XC4 has it, the XS10 has it, and the X100V, which makes even less sense. But the X100V also has HDMI out, but not the X Pro 3. I think that was a huge omission on Fujifilm's part. Paul, staying up for you. Oh, thanks, Paul. It's got to be late wherever you're at. Are you in Taiwan right now, Paul, or are you back in Shanghai? You love the styling of the XE4. Yeah, I really think the XE4 is your style, Paul. And then get the 27 lens. I think you'll love it. You're used to shooting with an iPhone, a smartphone style, which is about a 26 or 28 mil equivalent wide angle. When you go 40 mil equivalent, you're getting, I mean, I have the Rorecore 40 mil, which is the same as the 40 mil Summicron with Leica on the rangefinders. I love 40. It's a cool focal length. And when I shoot Leica, I'm either at 28 or at 40. And so, Paul, I think you'll like the 40 focal length. It'll change your photography for sure. Michael, how confident are you about the WR of the 70-300 with that huge extended on the zoom? Yeah, basically what they'll have is there's basically going to be like a little squeegee. There's going to be a little squeegee on this end. So every time you zoom in, it's basically squeegeeing it. And WR eventually fades away over time because the rubber gaskets they use, it's rubber, right? And it's impregnated with like not necessarily oils, but over time, what happens to old plastic and old rubber? It starts to leach the oils. And so in 10 years, or I would say even in 5 years, this would be less WR than when you buy it new. And in 10, 15, 20 years, if you're still using this lens, the WR is going to be almost non-existent. It'd be better than if it didn't have any WR because there are going to be extra seals in here. And so I think WR is a little bit of I wouldn't say it's a misnomer. I know Ken Wheeler always says there's nothing truly weather sealed. I don't agree with him. It is weather sealed to a certain extent. And if it's pouring rain, you can confidently go out and shoot with this. But I would say, why would you be shooting in the rain anyways? You should probably have an umbrella and cover when you're using it. But I always say WR is more important with dust and humidity. So if you're in a place like Thailand or you go to Antarctica, WR, the sealing is going to help with internal humidity. You don't want the lens to be getting wet from the inside because of humidity and the cold, the air temperature difference between the cold and heat from inside the lens. And I think that's the biggest sort of issue. And with that, this will be sealed enough between the in the zoom mechanism. But very good question. Thanks for asking that. Did I miss? Sorry, guys. It keeps on jumping here when I pick the comments. It just kind of jumps. Bert, what was the highlight of the summit? Personally, it definitely was the GFX 100S. That is the real highlight. And then the next highlight is the 80 f1.7 for sure. That's a revolutionary camera, and I have a feeling that body will be back ordered for 6 months. You watch. Although Fujifilm may have learned from the GFX 100 that was back ordered for months as well. People who pre-ordered it on the day of launch didn't get their copies for like 2 months. If they learn from that, Fujifilm has been making the GFX 100S for the past 3 months and just like making as many copies as possible. But I still say that if they get the reaction from the top end Nikon, Canon, and to a certain extent like Pentax, full frame DSLR, and the Sony A9 top A7 shooters, and those considering the A1, which is funny. Fujifilm talked about it during the X Summit, right? Which I thought was kind of cool that Fujifilm mentioned Sony in their own keynote address there. I think the GFX 100S is the best option for those other than those that need optimal autofocus speed, as well as those that need like 600 f4s, 1200 f5.6s, like the super telephoto primes or very specialty lenses, which Fujifilm is slowly building up their GFX lens line, but it still doesn't have the plethora of available lenses that like Nikon or Canon has. And so GFX 100S, definitely that was the highlight. Alex talking about the XF27 original versus the new have the same optics. Yeah, same optics, which is kind of a bummer because I never felt that the 27-28 wide open was that sharp anyways. You can always tweak it in post, but it's not a sharp lens, but it has unique rendering. I don't mind the lens. It just wasn't a huge fan of it. Do you prefer, what do you go for? Do you prefer the weather sealing? Also, does the new XF27 have a new motor? Yeah, I don't know that. I don't think this says, they say fast autofocus with linear motor. Also, no, sorry, that's the 70-300. They just say fast autofocus, but they don't mention anything in the description that it's a new motor. So my guess is it's the old motor, but until I test it, I won't know. But yeah, I mean, if you can get a good deal on the older version, go for it, because optically you're going to get the same image quality, right? Or if you want that aperture ring. And WR, I'm not sure if that's a big deal for you with the type of photography that you're doing. Some lenses aren't WR and it's not a big deal, but depends on what you do. Okay, I'm just trying to see if I'm going to catch up here. Here we go. Remy talking about replacing his 55-200. Yeah, the 70-300 is a good replacement. It's the same weight, 580 grams is a 55-200. Fujifilm didn't have a 55-200 to send me, and so I didn't do a back-to-back test. And so sorry, I couldn't do that, but it's reasonably sharp. The micro contrast isn't as good as the 100-400, but that lens is like $1,000 more than the 100 to 300. So you'd obviously expect that lens to be sharper and have better micro contrast. But I thought it was a decent performing lens. Oh, Thomas talking about getting all the film simulations in Lightroom. Yeah, there's hacks in Capture One and Lightroom, as well as you can change the XF data if you have those apps that can change XF to make it think it's a different camera and get access to all the film simulations. You can definitely do that for sure. And Jonathan talking about the XE4 exact camera he's been looking for. So you're going to sell the A7R2 and getting that. Yeah, it's a very different types of cameras, and hopefully you like it. And Remy talking about the minimalist design. Yeah, I mean, some people like it. I think in a way, Fujifilm seems to be very design driven like Apple, and Fujifilm wins tons of design awards globally for their camera design. And because of that, I think often they kind of, if they were going to err on any side, it's err on the side of design versus function. Because if you ever seen like a DSLR, like I have, I'll be right back. I have an older DSLR, and these things are, these things just kind of, they may be functional, but they're pretty ugly. They're just, look at all the tons that just, it's over buttoned, right? It's just all these buttons, and it feels really nice in the hand, but and then you look at something like the X100V, right? I mean, look how minimalist this is. Look at just kind of, you could tell that design is that not picking up the autofocus very well versus something like this, right? What a big difference. And so like Apple, minimalism is important to Fujifilm. So like the MacBook Pro, as they started removing all the ports and all the connections, Fujifilm's removing the D-pad, minimalizing the buttons, putting AEL and AFL in the same button, butting up the play button with the delete button or something like that, whatever they're doing. What are they doing? They put the drive and the delete button as the same button right there. So they're minimalizing the amount of buttons. That actually makes sense. You don't need delete and drive at the same time because you can only delete an image while you're in play mode. So that makes sense to me. The 27 would be nicer in silver with silver camera. Yeah, we'll see if they create a silver version, but if they don't do it from the get-go, my assumption is they're not going to do it. Hey, Alberto from NYC. Exciting day for the photo world. It definitely is. I mean, even if you are, unless you are hardcore, blinded Sony, Canon, Nikon, Pentax shooter, Olympus, you should be very happy what Fujifilm is doing because it will only push the other manufacturers to work harder, right? And the GFX 100S, one of the things I was really surprised and happy about is they're actually able to get phase detect, because the older one was the older sensor, because it's made by Sony, right? There was only contrast detect, and autofocus was always sluggish on the GFX series. And finally, with phase detect, they've increased the autofocus. Although they didn't say it was both contrast and phase, they just mentioned phase. So I haven't had a chance to look through the literature yet, but once I do, I'll get back to you. And when I review it, I'll get back to you, and I'll do a kind of a head-to-head, XT4, XS10, X Pro 3 versus the GFX 100S when it comes to autofocus, because they're really trying to show it like, hey, you can photo people playing sports and on jet skis and snowboarding, and that's the kind of stuff they've been showing, right? So we'll see if it can do that. But if it can do that, that's the killer. I mean, a medium format camera that can shoot video as well as shoot sports and wildlife, that's madness. I think it kind of took a little bit of the thunder away from the Sony A1, which is about the same price, right? About $6,000 US. It's the same price as the Fujifilm GFX 100S. And I think if resolution and image quality is of your utmost priority, then get the Fujifilm GFX 100S. If autofocus speed, video, those other things that Sony's pushing, if those things are more important to you, then get the Sony. I don't think they're direct competition. They're quite different cameras. But yeah, I'm really happy with the with the 100S. Someone Mian confirming that Lee said that the 27 autofocus is almost the same as the old one. So yeah, it wasn't. It's the Gen 1 focus, right? Like the 35-1.4 and the 23-1.4. So it's going to be kind of sluggish on the newer bodies, like the XT4. It'll perform a little better, but nothing like the Fujicrons. It won't have that nice stepless motor or linear motor. GA645ZI Professional versus GW6903. I like the GA6. For those of you guys that are wondering what we're talking about, these are film cameras. I like the in terms of image quality, the Texas Leica, the GW690. It has a 6:9 image, the 120 image. And that is a 2:3 aspect ratio. For that, I like, but you get like what, 7 shots or 8 shots on a roll of 120. And the 645, you get 16 shots, but it is 6x4.5. So it's like half the size of the Texas Leica. So depending on what you're looking for, and plus the GA645 is auto everything, right? Autofocus, auto exposure. You can do manual focus by scale. You can do manual exposure if you want. It has date stamp, exposure stamp in between the frames. It's a very advanced point and shoot, and and it's also, when you look through it, everything is in portrait mode, where the GW690 is in portrait landscape mode, which makes more sense for landscape type photography. Very different cameras. It's like saying Miata or Jeep. Well, they're both convertibles, but one's for off-roading, and both have the rooftops can come off, but one's a sports car and one's a Jeep. So 2 very different cameras, I think, for 2 very different type of photographers. Sony versus Fujifilm. When it comes to color, 100% Fujifilm. 100%. Sony colors aren't that great. You can make them look great if you're good, but straight out of the box, straight out of camera JPEGs, Fujifilm. The next camera I say that has really good colors is probably going to be Canon. Canon's color science is great, but they just have like the one color, where Fujifilm has multiple colors, multiple kind of like filters, right? Film profiles. It gives you different looks and feels, where Canon has their basic color profile, and it's solid. It reminds me a little bit of classic chrome with a little bit more punch. That's what Canon's basic color profile looks like, which is actually really nice. If I was going to compare classic chrome against Canon's standard color profile, I think for overall work doing everything, I would pick the Canon. The classic chrome, depending on what you're shooting, you would need to tweak it a little bit, because let's say you're shooting something and it has a nice red in it and you want the red to pop a little bit. In the channel setting in Lightroom, you need to kind of bump up the saturation with classic chrome, because sometimes it mutes colors too much, and so you need to bump it up just a little bit. Where I think Canon's color profile is kind of nice straight out of the box, but I shoot raw anyways, and I tweak all my colors from base, and so that's why Canon is cool. But Fujifilm gives you multiple color bases to work off of, so that's why I prefer the Fujifilm color profiles. Michael, pretty interesting. The last question on firmware: X Pro 3 getting the fix, X100V getting update to allow ND during video. That's great. I saw that. And they didn't explain exactly what they're adding to the X Pro 3. And they did mention the XT3 update, and they didn't give details exactly. I hope the update is everything that the X Pro 3 and the XT4 has. They better do that. At least for the Pro. I think the XT30 is dead, which is sad. I wish the XT30 had the same firmware as the XE3 and the XS10. And if they did, that would be a really good competition, right? $849 for the XE4, $899 for the XT30, $999 for the XS10, all same firmware. But the fact that the XT30 has the old firmware, I think even older than the XE3, none of the new film simulations, none of the HDR. It has the same sensor and the processor as all these cameras, but it's just the old firmware. So unless Fujifilm does a firmware update on it, I don't recommend the XT30. Unless you really love the design and the ergonomics, I say XE4 or XS10. Forget the XT30 until there's a firmware update. But I'm happy that the XT3 is getting one. And the XT3 gets a full firmware update. Let's just say the same as the X-T4 and the X Pro 3. When the XH2 comes out, I will sell my X-T4, which I'm using now, get the X-T3, don't need IBIS for talking head like this, and then use the XH2 for out in the streets, for video, that kind of stuff with the IBIS. That's how much I like the X-T3. I really like the X-T3. Alex from Ottawa, thanks for answering my questions. My pleasure. Meg 007, off topic. What's your favorite macro lens of choice on the X system? I don't know, because I don't use Fujifilm's macro lenses. I use my Minolta macro lenses with adapters. So someone else can tell me. The one I've had the most fun with is the 80 f2.8 because it doubles as a portrait lens. So if I needed a macro lens in the Fujifilm, that's why I have a Minolta 100 2.8 macro. I love that because at 100 2.8, it's a great portrait lens, but as well, it's a great macro lens. And so with Fujifilm, same thing. The 80 2.8, I recommend that as a product photography macro lens, as well as a portrait lens and a short telephoto. Donald saying, buttons, that's another reason I'm looking at Fuji. If I shoot manual on my Sony A6600, if the shutter speed, sometimes I activate the ISO. Yeah, like the Sony, they really messed up their crop sensor cameras, the A66. Two of my brothers shoot the A6000 series, and they're both going to switch over to Fujifilm because they're both like, the Sony's ignoring it. I mean, remember, Sony's making the sensor for Fujifilm to Fujifilm spec, right? Because it has the X-Trans layer, the color filter array. But Sony's making the medium format sensor for Fujifilm. They're also making the APS-C sensor for Fujifilm. So they're great at making the sensors. They're not as great as making their cameras, other than the stuff that they're focused on, which is the A7 full frame series. But when it comes to their DSLRs, which was inherited from Minolta, and the 6000 series, which is the crop sensor stuff, I don't recommend them. They're very kind of hokey and weird to shoot. I recommend the A7C if you want a light, compact Sony E-mount camera body. But the 6600, the menu system is confusing. The A7C's menu system is also confusing. But if you want control and dials, I say, go Fujifilm. Was there any update on the XF1814? No mention of it, but it is coming. And that lens I'm super pumped for. I never got the 1614, but I probably would get the 1814. I would. It comes down to size and weight. If it's not overly big, it should technically be smaller than the 1614. And if it's about the size of the 2314 and the size and weight of the 2214, I'd be happy. So I'm excited. 28 mil equivalent is my focal length. That's my 28 Summicron with my Leica. That is my go-to lens. My Ricoh GR1. I love 28. That's the field of view that I prefer. So yeah, I'm excited about it, but no mention of it. I thought maybe Jonas would ask about it, but maybe Jonas has a pre-production copy and he's not going to talk about it. Alan 27, no, it's not a new lens design. It's the old lens design. Jonas coming from Norway. Hello, Jonas. The Sony Alpha 1 costs $92,081 and the Fuji GFX is $76.57. Also in Europe, there's a different pricing. Look at that. So there you go. If you're in Norway, get the GFX 100S. If you're looking for megapixels, that's the way to go. Where is the XH2 Mac? Yeah, I mean, it was announced, I think, 2 years ago, right? That they said they are working on it. So I'm anxiously waiting for it as well. I mean, here in my studio is my XH1, and I love this thing. I just, at first, it was weird. Can I tell you guys a little story that nobody else has mentioned? I'm mentioning to you guys for the first time. Is notice that these two don't have a silver version. Why? Why is there not a silver version of the XS10? Why is there not a silver version of the H1. Very few Fujifilm cameras, other than the GFX series, the X series, they all had 2 or up to 3 color versions in the recent past. The original X Pro 1 only had 1 color. The original X100 only had the silver, and then they had a limited edition black a little bit later. And I think even the XS, X100S only came in silver, and then later on they announced the black. But since then, pretty much every X series cameras comes in multiple colors, except the XH1 and the XS10. I think it's because they're ugly. But they're ugly like a Saab or a Volkswagen Bug. They're ugly but pretty, right? And I think that's why. I think I said Fujifilm was a very design-focused manufacturer. They win a lot of design awards, and I think it was hard to make this in silver and not make it look ugly. Having this whole top plate in silver, having this whole top plate in silver, this whole thing in silver. So these two have a lot in common right here. Having it all black, like an all black dress or an all black suit, it kind of it thins out the profile a little bit. And I think that's why the XS10 and the XH1, they don't have a silver version, because it would just look weird. That's my thinking. My thoughts. You guys can comment down below. Let me see here. XT3, I would love to save the WRRB adjustments to custom sims, but I agree it should get up to speed. Yeah, definitely. XT3 up to speed with the XT4 and the X Pro 3 and the XT30. I feel bad for those that own the XT30. They're sitting there crying, going like, I love the form factor of the XT30. I don't want a swing out screen, and I don't want the minimalist design of the XE4. Please upgrade. I would even say, like, I told this to Billy once. I said, for stuff like that, charge. Like, if you guys work on it and say like there's no money in it, then charge $50 to upgrade the firmware of the XT30 and sell it as like a thing, right? Sell the firmware update to update the XT30 for $50. I think people would pay for it. I mean, I would pay for it if I had an XT30. I'd pay for the extra cash and get it. Hi, Take. GR3 in crop mode or X100V? Depending on what you're doing, but I say X100V. Always get as much pixels and on sensor exposure as possible. But if you're in a pinch, then I say crop and post. Mac, is the GFX 50mm nearly as good as the 45 or the Pancake? I never liked the 45 that much. I found it had a little bit more distortion than I liked. I can definitely fix it in post and create a custom a profile on it. To be honest, I never tried the 50, so I couldn't tell you. But technically, a 50 would be more linearly corrected. As you go wider, it gets harder to correct for distortion, which typically as you go wider, you get more barrel distortion. As you go more telephoto, you get more pin cushioning. And so the 63 is very linear. That's why in general, a 50mm lens is easier to create. That's why Fujifilm went from the 35 knock to the 50 knock. It's easier to design and easier to have it f1 because the light coming in is more linear. You're bending less light. And so I say from a technical standpoint, the 50-35 should linearly be more corrected, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a sharper lens. But sometimes distortion kind of irritates me on certain lenses, and it definitely irritated me on the 45 2.8. So that actually would be a good test. I haven't tested it, so you'd have to ask someone like Jonas, who's probably tested all of those. How to claim warranty? Is Adi, depending on what country you're in. Some countries don't have a official Fujifilm office. They just have a distributor. And for those countries, I feel bad for you. Like Hong Kong has a official Fujifilm distributor that deals with warranty, but it's not an actual Fujifilm office with Fujifilm employees. And so luckily in Canada, we have an actual Fujifilm office. Same with the US, same with the UK, same with Japan, obviously, and a lot of other countries. If you're in a country where there is no official Fujifilm head office, then it goes to your distributor, who then whatever country you're in, they decide who gets to fix it. If they just have to ship it back to Japan or ship it to another Fujifilm HQ, or if they fix it in-house in that country using some third-party repair shop, which I wouldn't want. I would want to get an official Fujifilm employee to work on it, right? So luckily I'm in Canada. I get to get it fixed in Canada, but if you're in some country that there isn't one, I feel bad. Alan, what did Fujifilm have to compromise on, if any, for the GFX 100S to make it such a small package? They just learned to miniaturize everything. In the presentation, they talked about miniaturizing the ibis mech, which, first of all, they have to make it bigger, right? Because originally it was on the XH1, and then when they put it in the X100, they had to make it bigger. And then when they had to put it in the X100S, GFX 100S, they had to make it, again, sort of between the size of the XH1, but still strong enough to handle this larger sensor size of the medium format sensor. And so they just shrunk everything and probably became more just like the XH1, right? The XH1 was this first ibis mech made ground up. They didn't order it from somebody else. And because of it, they actually made the metal thicker. Everything was thicker and bigger about the XH1. And then when they made the XT4, it's just slightly bigger than the XT3. Again, by just learning how to miniaturize things. So I don't think there was much compromise at all. I remember the GFX 100 has a built-in grip with the 2 batteries, which I always told Fujifilm that was a big mistake. I said no. Because the GFX 100, it's so heavy. Even if it was given to me, I would rarely shoot with it. It's too heavy. And I think all of us, when we complain to Fujifilm, because often when these new cameras come out, Fujifilm does send us a questionnaire and asks us our opinion. And what I said was, get rid of that built-in grip. Don't do it. Have the GFX 100 the same size as the GFX 50S. That's what I think all of us complain about. And so it makes sense because now it takes 1 battery, but it takes the same battery that's in the XT4. And so that's a good thing. They're able to use this newer, more efficient battery. And so, I mean, it's amazing what they were able to do. And I'm glad that they prioritized size and weight. And they did change the design. It does have a PSAM dial instead of the traditional Fujifilm kind of, how does this work kind of aperture, put it in A, shutter speed, put it in A. That's programmed. Some people were confused by that, so they simplified it. Same with the XS10. You know, they put the PSAM dial in here that most people understand. And I'm gotten right to the bottom here. Michael, I keep showing the XH1. You regret selling it. Debating getting a used one off of KEH. Wish I could get some detail on the XH2. I mean, I'm not selling this XH1 ever. I mean, this is gonna be a classic. It's like the original X100. If you bought it, I think you were foolish to sell it. This is a digital classic. Yeah, I mean, use my discount codes at KEH and you'll get 5% off. But I say get it. I love this camera. It's a great studio camera where autofocus speed isn't the priority. And in the studio, I prefer this style of articulating screen versus a full flip out because it makes the camera wide, right? I don't like, even though this is small and compact, by the time you go like this, it feels much larger than this when you're in a studio because you got lights, you have cables, and you're constantly knocking it and stuff like that. So I prefer this for studio work versus something like a fully articulating screen. So I like my XH1. Definitely not going to sell it. I'm going to keep it. And Cafe YVR, 11 a.m. Thank you. So I'm going to slowly start to wrap up. I had notes here. John Allen, where did I get my hat? I got it from Fujifilm. They gave it to me. Thank you, Fujifilm. Thank you, Billy. Thank you, Mark. And I wish I had one to give away, but Camera Girl took my other one. And so I don't have one to give away. I'm going to just quickly look through my notes here, stuff I want to talk about. So yes, the X100V ND filter now works in movie mode. They promised to upgrade the Brightline OVF frame lines on the X Pro 3. And as well, the XT3, they said new features, but they didn't explain what. Let me see here. Oh, and I did like what one of the ex-photographers mentioned, that the new GFX 100S, he said, the one from Singapore, he said it's the first pro work camera he had that he also actually enjoys using for play. And it's true, right? I use the XT4 for work. I leave it here in my studio. And then for play, I use my X Pro 3, right? Because it's smaller, it's more compact, it's more fun. And he was saying that the GFX 100S is the first medium format work camera. I think he even just said work camera, that he can use it for play. And that's true. If I had a 100 megapixel ibis equipped medium format camera that wasn't much heavier than a full frame DSLR, and you knew you could use those extra megapixels, I would probably take it around as well. I mean, that if I went to Hong Kong and I can only take one camera for everything, it would probably be the GFX 100S or the XT4 that I have currently, or an XH2. I mean, I'm going to try to figure out a way of being able to afford one. I don't know, this sound weird to do a crowdfunding. bigheadtaco wants a GFX 100S. If you guys want me to own one and shoot with it, I might do like a limited edition zine or something for those that donated or something like that. I would love to have it. Just I can't afford 6,000 and then another couple of thousand, like 10,000 US. So that's like $13,000 Canadian for the GFX 100S. Can't afford it, but I would love to have it, and I'm gonna enjoy reviewing it. And that's probably the first GFX series camera that I actually want to buy. The 50S is something I really wanted to get, but it had some quirks. And I knew there was going to be a GFX 100S anyway, so I was going to wait. And now that it's here, would I buy a used 50S? Maybe, if the price is right, or just wait and buy the 100S. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Jay, why GFX for video? Is it something that they continue to mature over the years? A lot of it has to do with bokeh, shallow depth of field. If you get the 81.17 on the, or even the 100 110 f2 on the GFX, and you're shooting it on the full sensor, the kind of shallow depth of field you're going to get, which is very cinematic, right? You're isolating your subject. You're going to get shallower depth of field, and that's often why a lot of videographers do like to go to full frame or 35 mil when it comes to video. It's not necessarily noise. Like the Micro Four Thirds, the GH series is great for video. A lot of YouTubers still use the GH4 and the GH5 for video. But if you're trying to be cinematic and you want that shallow depth of field, the larger the sensor, the shallower depth of field you can get, all things being equal. So that's often why people like it. I don't need it. And I'm not switching the GFX 100S for video because I don't want that much resolution. But getting that shallow depth of field is pretty darn cool for cinematic type shots. Alan, do you consider the X Pro 3 to be a digital classic? Definitely. The original X Pro 1 and this quirky thing, because I'm pretty sure this will be gone by the X Pro 4 because there's so much people that are hating on it. And I think it's a shame because I think if more people actually tried it, they would actually realize, actually, this is pretty darn cool. And that's also for guys like me who have an XT4 and an X Pro 3, so I can compartmentalize the way I shoot. If you're the type of person that can only afford one pro camera, I get it. You want something that's more useful, more functional. So you want like an articulating screen like this, or more of a classic articulating screen like this. But if you can afford two, that's why guys like Jonas, who has access to everything, someone like me who has access to everything, I'm telling you guys, 100%, this works. It's great. But if you shoot a lot of video and you depend a lot on the LCD and you refuse to change your shooting style, then this probably isn't the right camera for you. But if you're a still shooter, you shoot a lot of film photography and you're not used to having an LCD screen staring back at you, this is perfect. But I do consider this a modern classic for sure, the X Pro 3. And I was considering selling this. I probably won't. And if I do, I might just buy another one. We'll see. The silver, the DR silver, this is the DR black. But, as you guys know, this collects fingerprints. I think I recently cleaned it, but you can still see a little bit of fingerprinting there. And so we'll see what happens. But I love it. I think I'm going to keep it. And someone asked about the 27 compared to the 23. I'll do a test. All right. So wait for that test. And in Portugal, 5,999 euros in Portugal. So what is that in? That's the same as US dollars, right? I think euros and US dollars now are the same. And Travel the World says, I love Fuji. Exchange my Fuji cameras for the X-H1 and the X-T30 at Map Camera. Awesome camera shop in Japan when I visited in October. Excellent service from them and very happy with the cameras. Very good. Congratulations, Travel the World. Hopefully they'll give you a X-T30 firmware update. And so that's it. Thank you so much for joining, guys. 1 hour and 10 minutes. I apologize again for not having OBS working. I had it all set up. The slide presentation was ready to rock and roll, but just kind of didn't happen. So I apologize. Last question, firmware update on the X1 and the F. There's no word on it. Just like my XH1, no word on it. So we'll see what happens. But thanks for joining. Wait for my XE4 video that I'm just finishing up right now. That's why I need to get off so I can post it. So half the questions you guys are asking will be in that video. And then we'll join you guys next week, all right? So 112 of you guys, thank you so much for joining, guys. And we'll talk to you soon. And what should I grab here? Just how about this? In homage to the X70, RIP X70, but maybe X80, who knows, guys? But most likely not because they put this screen on the XE4. Happy shooting. Click, click, and click. Peace.